Yash Deve, please introduce our speakers today at the A.Richard Distinguished Innovator Lecture Series.
Yes, so as Victoria just said, I'm really excited to be here introducing both our speakers today. So we have Mr. Sai Venkataraman in conversation with Mr. Andy Horwitz. And again, I'm personally just very eager to hear, given their unique points of view, you have both Mr. Venkataraman as the founder and CEO of a growing startup security advisor, and Mr. Andy Horwitz, who is the a VP of Business Development of Netscope, which is actually currently valued at $7.5 billion. Specifically, I find what really stands out when I look at Mr. Venkataraman's background is how he was able to convert his strong background in strategy consulting at Bain and Company, as well as being part of the executive team at Fortscale, and all of his past experiences into coming up with this novel product and service that is a security advisor, and how it's really actually permeated the space so well. So it's integrated with companies like Slack and so on. And I think that's something that really stood out to me, the fact that it's having large reaching effects in our lives right now as well. Secondly, but definitely not the least, we also have Mr. Andy Horwitz here, who has a lot of experience in this field. He has a diverse technology background covering various sectors like cybersecurity, public cloud, storage, and consumer electronics. He's also executed multiple acquisitions, including some multi-$100 million transactions of companies like Evident.io, Redlock, and other cybersecurity companies. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce both of you and really look forward to hearing your talk today.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here.
Fantastic. Thanks for doing that. As we are wont to do, it's kind of nice to start with your background. And I have my handy dandy little slide here that I'm going to share. And I'm hoping that you all can take us through a little bit, so we kind of know a little bit about yourselves before we start talking about the industry. Sai, I think that it is phenomenal to look at the slide and think about basically in 2008, you were in school. I think you were still in India, and somehow in 10 years, you went from that to starting this pretty incredible company in a super challenging space. Can you talk us a little bit through your journey?
Of course. Thank you, Yash, for that intro. I grew up in India. I went to school there, engineering first, spent some time at Unilever, and then I did my MBA from one of the Indian institutes there at Ahmedabad. And then I was hired by Bain, and I worked in several countries for Bain and Company. Actually, Bain is a big recruiter at Berkeley as well. I started off in APAC at Bain, and then I went to Europe, ended up here in the Bay Area, worked on a number of projects, number of fields, strategy consulting. And, interestingly, while at Bain, it was at Bain that I started working in cybersecurity. Intel hired us when they were looking to acquire McAfee and asked us to do a counter diligence. And then spent 6 interesting years at Bain, and I developed this itch, to get my hands dirty. I did not want to be an advisor forever. And so I went over to Intel initially in 2014 as a director of strategy for the McAfee business. Intel back then owned McAfee. That acquisition didn't quite work out for them, but then it worked out for me. I ended up in McAfee as a director of strategy, and then finally I got a line job. I became a director of products for data security. And then, when I look at my different jobs at Bain, Bain's really about behavior change as an advisor, changing behavior of executives, influencing decisions. At Intel, as a director of products for data security, I could actually see that the number one reason why security incidents happen were actually human actions. People go and share data. People go to social media. People click on things. People fall victim to scams. And again, so people and behavior was central to what we were trying to solve. And then after that, as life went on, I was ready to take a few risks. And so I joined this company that came out of Israeli intelligence called Fortscale. And I became part of their management team, and we got acquired. And finally, I had the risk appetite to go and start up. And I also had the idea, the number one reason why security incidents happen is because of human actions. And the only thing that CIOs and chief security officers could do to solve that was training, which does not really work. Nobody really wants to be trained. So could you build an advisor that could intelligently engage employees, coach them, and change behavior? So that was the core premise behind Security Advisor. And in the early days, I met Andy. Andy back then was, the highest valued dedicated cybersecurity company was CrowdStrike. And everybody goes to pitch to CrowdStrike. So we also went and pitched to CrowdStrike to be let into their app store. And Andy saw something in us and let us in. And that was a big break for us. And since then, we've done a few rounds of funding. We got several customers, and we're growing quite fast. And so far, so good. So currently, I'm the CEO of Security Advisor. Andy?
Sure. I think Sais is selling themselves short. The journey that he's had is truly remarkable. When you think about where he was 10 years ago, right? Probably in a very similar situation that you find yourself in, and what he's done, what he's accomplished is truly remarkable.
Thank you, Andy.
It's a pleasure getting to know him. As you can see, I have a lot more gray hair. I'm definitely a lot more older than Sai. And, if you would have met a 21-year-old Andy, ground for memory, I actually wanted to be a restaurant financial analyst. That's what I wanted to be, right? So I didn't know anything about technology, worked in restaurants a lot to pay way through college and things like that. So that's what I thought. And I got really lucky. I got an opportunity really via networking to join Morgan Stanley. And I actually had an opportunity, 2 different roles. One was going to work with like the farm equipment analyst covering like John Deere and Caterpillar, or work for the person covering enterprise hardware, which back in that day was IBM and Hewlett Packard and Sun, Network Appliance, Dell. And that was really how I got into technology, and really, really lucky. And as you see, I don't have an MBA, but part of my MBA was really working at Morgan Stanley and then Seagate. I was able to get my CFA, really kind of give a basic in technology. And from Morgan Stanley, I actually went, there's the buy side and the sell side. And similar to Sai, we both had, I would say, kind of classic jobs out of undergrad or grad school, or obviously working for a preeminent consultant, working on Wall Street. Then I went to a small hedge fund and really got broad in technology. And those who may get into investing, it's exciting, especially, we can have a conversation on valuations later on. But what is very different is when you work for particularly a public company hedge fund, stocks are a piece of paper, and you can't have a sense of ownership. And that's not who I am, right? I want to have a sense of ownership. So again, networked, leverage relationships, and Seagate was one of the companies that I covered and knew very well. And they invited me to join them to run corporate strategy, moved me out from New York City to California, literally on my 30th birthday, moved out to California and did a bunch of different roles at Seagate. And that's really where, understood how a technology company really works, right? Because I was on the outside looking in. Again, Sai had that experience kind of being outside in, but getting deeper. Morgan Stanley, Owen Oak, I was always on the outside. Now I was on the inside and seeing truly how things, the sausage was made, they will say. And I got to do a bunch of different roles: corporate strategy, product management, business development, and, got to understand storage and was very excited, a lot of the growth opportunities. And again, then networking, a CEO joined a company called Barracuda that happened to be an 8-minute commute from my house. That always driven by, and the new CEO, we had a bunch of people in common, and
he's a Cal grad, by the way.
Is BJ? Did BJ look at a Cal?
Not BJ.
Illinois.
Not BJ, but another one. But we'll talk about it later.
Okay, one of the founders might have been. I think.
Yeah.
I think Zach actually. And then, but BJ, a guy named BJ Jenkins, brought me on, and again, was willing to wear different hats, right? I actually ran a thing called analyst relations, but also business corporate development. And business development in my world was really working with other technology companies to help create solutions where money may not change hands. and the corporate development side, which I love, which is making investments and acquisitions. And Barracuda is a great company. It was really fun, very different cultural. And as you look at your career, to really think about the different cultural dynamics, I always think about the industry, the company, and then the people. And the people is what you're going to remember. And I have a lot of great memories of people. To give you an idea of the different background, Barracuda literally had a UFC fighting ring on the sales floor. And like we would have feats of strength, like we do like push-ups.
Wait. What do you mean by UFC fighting ring? Sorry, can you explain that?
Yes. So Ultimate Fighting Championship, like mixed martial arts, literally a ring, with fences, like think of a boxing ring, but like fenced in. And people would literally like, you'd have contests inside that on a sales floor. Very unorthodox. But a lot of fun, but just that fun culture. And then I got a call from Palo Alto Networks, which was a mature cybersecurity company, but a great opportunity. Got to work for a great mentor and do, again, business and corporate development, really focus on public cloud. I had ownership of working with all the public cloud providers, AWS, Microsoft, Google. And again, I didn't know much about cloud, but the good thing, Palo Alto Networks didn't either. So I got to learn a bunch and really grow that business while also with corporate development and making a lot of investments in cloud security, which is still a really important area. So great opportunity there. And then got to join CrowdStrike, another great cybersecurity company that had just gone public, again, driving its journey to cloud. And they asked me to do something unique with the CrowdStrike store, which was really building an ecosystem for smaller vendors where they could really leverage some of the platform that CrowdStrike had. In this case, I got to meet Sai as one of the early companies that kind of came into the store and was building something from scratch, something really unique. And, I love being able to interact with a bunch of different startups, right? And, the difference of being a big fish and a small fish. And, I was able to do a bunch of things at CrowdStrike. And as I said, people are always really important. And a bunch of people from Palo Alto Networks had gone to different places in the industry. A bunch ended up at a company called Netscope, which in itself is doing really well. And the former head of sales is now the president there, and an opportunity to go and work with people that I know and I care about and I really enjoy working with. And recently joined Netscope this past summer. And again, running business development, running all the public cloud providers, which I love, and hoping to go and create something else new and exciting. So that's a little bit of my journey.
So you all make it sound really easy. It's kind of stunning to see the journey that you've had. I am just wondering, not everything is that easy. And we hadn't talked about this, but I'm wondering if there's anything that didn't go quite according to plan, especially Sai with you as you were starting Security Advisor.
There are lots of things that go wrong. The biggest thing with startups is founder disagreements, especially in the early days. You come close to dying several times. So having the trust with your founders, being able to disagree. The good thing about our team is that we've always been comfortable having disagreements, from everything, how do you split the shares to ideas on fundraising, initial customers, product design. So, things that often go wrong is, learning to disagree. That's something that is risky. Finding the initial customer, the first customer is always the hardest to find. Finding the first investor, that can be easy. Or I'm a first-time entrepreneur, so it was actually quite difficult. And then, we'll talk about it a bit more, finding proof points that your idea carries weight, that your product can actually work. That is actually quite challenging as well.
Can you remind us who you founded Security Advisor with?
So it was actually with a couple of colleagues from McAfee. And so I come from the data security world, and my two co-founders, one of them used to run endpoint security, and both of them are deep technical engineers, So one of them used to run McAfee's endpoint security practice, and the other, he ran McAfee's cloud security. And all three of us saw the same problem. We come from different sides of cybersecurity. For those of you who do not know cybersecurity, it's an incredibly fragmented market. Nobody has more than 10% market share. An average customer or an average enterprise that we talk to has like 60 different cybersecurity vendors. That's the average. And so it's an incredibly fragmented market. Nobody solves everything. And that's part of the problem. And so we came from three different sides of cybersecurity, but we saw the same problem, the human, and how all the hacker had to do was trick one employee into doing something.
Interesting. You talked a little bit about with this founding team. Oh, actually, another question for you. I think it's interesting. Obviously, you were born and raised in India. Andy, I think you were born and raised on the East Coast. Is that right?
That is correct.
So it's interesting that you both ended up in Silicon Valley. Is there anything, I am kind of curious, culturally, anything that you adapted to, both of you, as you've come to be in the Valley?
I'll go first. So the answer is yes. Especially, I'm an East Coaster, grew up in Philly, and I spent actually 7 years in New York City. So I'm a type A personality to begin with. So come from the East Coast, when I moved to Silicon Valley, and especially, the area, actually, Seagate was heading up Scotts Valley, I actually thought everyone was lazy. I would get to the office at like 7:30, 8 a.m., parking lot's empty. I'd walk out even 5, 6 o'clock, parking lot's empty. But people in California have a better balance. People work very hard, but they have a different balance. Also, I didn't have kids. And so I'm coming to California now, I do, right? And there's a different balance and perspective that you have when you're 30 than when you're, getting closer to 50. So there's a definitely perspective, but I've definitely become softer as I've lived out here, and all my East Coast friends kind of make fun of me for it.
Yeah, it's interesting. And when I started off, in my first job at Bain, I started off in APAC, 70-hour work weeks. When I came to California again with Bain, the 4.5-day work week, that's typical for the Bay Area. It's 4.5 days. That was unusual. And then even management styles change. In general, you need to give people a lot more freedom here, and the way you work with people, to get the best out of your employees, out of your partners. So, the freedom expectations in the Bay Area, I believe, are higher than even the East Coast or APAC for sure. And so, learning to manage by looking at outcomes rather than process and how things are done. That was actually a steep learning curve as well. And then, there's just so much, there's a huge network that you can tap into here, a local network that's not available anywhere else. I did so many trips to Palo Alto, you're talking about it, to meet investors and then partners. Right now, the two of us are sitting here in Sunnyvale, and, Andy's office is not too far away. I met you not too long ago in Los Gatos. Everybody, a lot of people who matter are only a short drive away. And that's unusual as well. The world's obviously changed with the pandemic, but still people are nearby, and there's a unique ecosystem that we can take advantage of.
Speaking of the ecosystem, I should have mentioned, in back of you have Plug and Play. Can you talk about what that is?
So our company, we use Plug and Play. We are a Plug and Play. We're part of the Plug and Play ecosystem as well. In that,
even explain what Plug and Play is.
Yeah, Plug and Play is this unique incubator in the Bay Area. So they are an investor. They offer free real estate to startups if you get into their program. And then the way the funding works is that large companies, they pay money to come and sit here in the second floor, and then they're paying that money to interact with startups like us. And so for us, it's subsidized space, and it gives us access to potential customers, potential partners, potential investors, cloud assets. So it's like an all-in-one incubator, and it's based here in the South Bay in Sunnyvale. And it's useful and they host a lot of events where you can meet people. So I found investors, customers. So we actually found a very large customer, Zurich Insurance, in a meeting here. And so it's a place, again, unique to the Bay Area.
And it's great. And as a BD corp dev guy, I've come here, potentially advising small companies, but also, they'll set up a day and I'll do meet and greet with 6 to 8 startups, and they kind of get the pitch of why they should be valuable to us. And it's a great way because, as a corp dev business development professional, I'll never say no to our free education. And here I can get, go to 8 classes in one day. And it's a value to them and a value to us. And that's kind of a nice ecosystem that they've set up.
So
Yeah.
if I want to come and visit Security Advisor, I'm not going to be looking for a building down in San Jose that says Security Advisor, but if I go
Not
into
yet.
Plug and Play, I'll see you on that list. Can
Exactly.
you, we're going to talk a little bit about things in the industry, but you talked about how you all first met. I'm really wondering if you can tell a little bit more about that story, what was going on that day, what the reactions of each of you were. You have fairly different backgrounds. So I'm kind of
I would love
curious,
that.
what was it that made you connect?
As a prelude to that, can you pull up the first question? Because I think that's actually a good segue, and kind of we can talk about how we each walked away, what our impression, how we walked away from that meeting.
I love that. So everybody get your fingers ready. We have quite an interactive start for you. So actually, Sai, would you mind asking this question, and then I will go ahead and pull up the poll if you'll ask the question and give the options.
Sure. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to share this question. You guys are going to vote. And then I'm going to tell you what I thought was important. And then Andy is going to tell us what he thought was important. So, the question here is, based on our own life. So smaller startup, security advisor, young company, Andy, executive at CrowdStrike. What's the best way for a small startup to get this bigger company, executives at this bigger company, to pay attention to them? Is it about, showing unique value? Hey, we are different and we've got this awesome idea. Is it about, hey, we can actually add value? Our joint customers really value this. Is it about following their program rules, the rules that they've defined? Is it about marketing alignment, replicating their marketing messaging? Is it about being super easy to work with and liking each other? So those are the, 5 different elements. Those are 5 different elements, and I'm quite curious to see how you guys vote.
So everybody's forced to answer with, what's the best, you're all doing midterms, now it's the same thing. What do you think is the best answer for that? So let me go ahead. We have about 2/3 of people. Ooh, we have a rush of people suddenly answering. I'm going to go ahead and close it out in 2 seconds. And 1. And now let me share the results with you, and let's see if you guys are surprised, Sai and Andy.
I am not surprised, but I'm actually now excited to share our answers. So
yeah,
how would Sai answer, and how would I answer that?
Yeah, and I guess everybody can see these results. So showing unique value to the solutions is kind of by far the biggest winner of this, and be super easy to work with is second.
I am with you guys. Startups, entrepreneurs, they always believe in the idea. Hey, I'm special. I've got this awesome idea. I've got this awesome product. And, my toy is shinier than yours. And that's always what we focus on. I got this awesome idea. That's why you started the company. You started the company because you believe in your idea. So it's always number one for entrepreneurs. Most entrepreneurs, there are always exceptions. The second thing is, showing some sort of joint value. When you go talk to a VC, when you go talk to investors, they drill it into you. Show me customers, show me, I've got 1,000 startups pitching to me. The third thing is, you want to look hungry, you want to convince them that you're likable people. Those are the 3 things I thought were important. Andy?
So I'm going to throw a different perspective on this. And this is from my experiences working from, a few big companies, but also even working with big companies that were bigger than me, like Microsoft, Google, and AWS. And every startup thinks it's about creating that unique value proposition. And I'm going to say that's not what's valued most, because at a company, when you're at CrowdStrike or Palo Alto Networks or even Netscope, we get startups calling every day showing how we can add value. You don't have so much bandwidth and so much focus. So the best way for a company to really get on our radar and get noticed is, number one, actually follow the program rules that we've got set up. And same thing with AWS and Google and Microsoft, and where I think I've been successful and I've seen other companies be successful, is follow the programs they've got set up and get noticed, have success, right? Because you come in and try and do something unique, they don't have time. Everyone is running really, really fast, really, really hard. Everyone wants that big company's attention. Being unique in your solution is not the way to do it. It's actually being first following the rules, second, being really easy to work with, right? Reduce the friction level. And then the first part is it's actually a joint customer. Because the first thing I'm going to ask you, and I do this every single time, is do you have any joint customers? Do you have any customers who want us to work together? And I will tell you, 50%, maybe 90% of the time, the answer is no, or they don't have that lined up. They may even have a joint customer, but they haven't talked to that customer about why 1 + 1 is going to be greater than 2. And if
Andy,
that
for those,
yeah.
for the novices in the audience, me included, can you, with an example of a customer, I mean, really tell us like how you worked there? I mean, we're all consumers, but we don't necessarily know how things work at the enterprise level. Can you just give us an example of how you all, like what you mean when you say be easy to work with, or shared customers, or that would be helpful.
And this will tie and answer your first question of why Sai was super successful, right? So, because Sai actually didn't have joint customers, but what they did is we had a program with the store, and we kind of had, hey, rules to do both from a marketing perspective, from a technical engagement. And I told my team, security advisor, I wasn't sure that it was going to be successful. Didn't know much about it. It wasn't kind of core to what we did, but we said, hey, if it's a level 3 or less, then, let them to the store. And, if it was going to be more work, more on my team, my engineering resources, then it wasn't going to be an investment. So Sai's team was super easy to work with. Their engineers did most of the work, right? They actually read our documentation. People don't always read it, right? They actually looked at what our programs were, both from a marketing, a sales perspective, how it worked, and they fed on top of it. And then they were successful. And then because they actually had a value proposition, they did have customers, right? And so they were able to knock down some customers kind of quickly. And we were able to kind of say, okay, here's an example of what a win looks like. In the enterprise space, the other part of your question is, when I say, what is a joint customer? When you're small, right? And Sai mentioned earlier, getting that first few customers is really important. Especially in cybersecurity, but almost in anything in the enterprise infrastructure, they're going to have multiple vendors. There's 1,200 cybersecurity vendors. There are multiple different attack surfaces. You're going to walk in, they're going to have, whether it's a cloud provider, they're going to have an endpoint security solution, a network security solution, a web security solution, right? Sai's done really good. He's plugged into those, but he can go in and say, who are you using for web? Who are you using for email? And that customer will usually tell them, right? Because they want to get value out of their investment. And then we'll ask that customer, who's that customer? And generally we can go and say, hey, Mr. Customer, are you actually using Security Advisor? Did you like it? How would you like us to work together? I do that in Netscope. I'm doing that today with Google, right? We've got, and I have that with Microsoft, right? I need to move up, right? Punch above my weight class with Google by showing them customers, and then getting that customer to tell Microsoft and Google, I want you to work with Netscope. Same thing with CrowdStrike, getting a smaller vendor to tell CrowdStrike, hey, we really want to work with this vendor. We want you to work with them. That is honestly worth its weight in gold. And so it's hard, but that actually tells us a lot, because we're always looking to understand ultimately what the customer wants and the customer value, and especially the enterprise level, getting the customer to be your advocate for your startup is way stronger than you being your own advocate.
All right, Sai, let's hear your perspective. It sounds very buttoned up, Andy. I don't know.
I'll give you a, you guys are all students here, so I'll give you a short primer on what is cybersecurity, before I even, go deeper. So when you think about cybersecurity, right now you're using a device, that device needs to be secured. A device is called an endpoint. So CrowdStrike is like antivirus on that device, or it's protecting that device. And then you as students, you communicate to the external world through email. And so a lot of the threats, they arrive through email. You get an email saying, hey, the dean wants to meet with you. It's not actually the dean, or hey, click here to book a meeting with me. Or hey, you're going to lose your phone number. Your credit score is going to go down. And so people use our psychology, and so a lot of attacks happen on email. So you need to protect your email. That's email security. And then you communicate to the external world through websites. About half of the websites are fraudulent or malicious, and so you need to protect things. You need to protect yourself when you go to the websites. And then there's enterprises and there's consumer. As a consumer, you're not gonna buy all these security tools. So you just want a simple antivirus. But when it comes to enterprises, they have obligations. You have obligations to your customers. So when I sign a contract with my customers, I am signing that I'll protect their data. I will make sure that my company is secure. So I need to buy device security. I need to buy email security. I need to buy web security. And then I need to protect identity. So I need to protect identity security. And then underlying all of this is data. Data is often, for a lot of enterprises, their crown jewels. And so you need to encrypt the data, you need to protect the data. So cybersecurity has all these different types of cybersecurity, and no one company is good at everything. There's absolutely no platform company. Microsoft is probably the closest, and they maybe have a 10% market share in cybersecurity. Same, Google is much smaller. Companies like, Andy worked in 3 large cybersecurity companies: Palo Alto, CrowdStrike, Netscope, Barracuda. They all focus on different sides of cybersecurity. You have to secure networks. So there's this, when you talk about cybersecurity, especially in the enterprise side, there are different kinds of cybersecurity, different vendors, and it's incredibly fragmented. And so, what we do before I went to Andy is we said there are all these different types of security, but underlying all of it is the human. So how do we secure the human? You can secure the human by training them, but everybody hates training. So we'll plug into different types of security and find interesting advice to give humans, an advisor. And so, this was the idea. We thought it was cool, but Andy didn't quite care about the idea. And so, as a startup, it's always about trust. Nobody trusts you. Every startup spins a story. Customers don't trust you. Investors don't trust you. Partners don't trust you. If I say that something is 100, people in their minds, they're thinking it's 20. They discount it. People tend to discount 80% of what I say. And, that creates some weird dynamics, because now I don't say 100, I say 200. It's about building trust. And so you got this cool idea, which you think is important, but it's also about trust. So we went to CrowdStrike. They gave us a fair shot. And so we are hungry, as a startup, you got to take every little opportunity that's been given to you. So we'll follow the rules. We'll find joint customers. We'll be super responsive. We have internal agreements that any important email we respond to within an hour. And so, that's what we did with Andy. We met Andy. My takeaway first time was that, the first time I met Andy, it was through the way we got to Andy was through a common acquaintance, which adds value. And then
can you talk about that? Like that, just getting your finger on the pulse to get in the door. How did that?
Yeah, so I reached out to a colleague. So, CrowdStrike was actually started by ex-McAfee people. And, we are ex-McAfee folks as well. And so I reached out to this colleague in product management who was a director, and he said, yes, I'll introduce you to Andy. And he introduced us to Andy. We had a first meeting. And Andy's response is, yeah, come back to me in a bit. You take 100 shots as a startup, some of them eventually work out. And then we eventually, we got a second meeting, and then a little better. And we are also becoming a bit more, you have to hang in there. Nothing happens like in month 1.
So Sai, when you went in there to talk to Andy first, Sai, you're a really good listener. And that is a hard thing to be. But when you go in there for that meeting with CrowdStrike, are you allowed to ask questions, or did you have to be on and present? How did that work?
Actually, you're allowed to ask, It depends on who you're talking to. But Andy listened to us, as he said, that was a takeaway. Our takeaway too was that he was not fully convinced, we were a maybe in his list. That was our takeaway as well. We are a maybe. Sometimes people fall in love with you. That was not the case here.
Well, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that makes everybody work a little bit harder. I don't know, Andy, is a maybe a good thing for you?
Absolutely, because sometimes it's a hard no, because again, there's only so much time. And I think strong lessons at Sai, right? He leverages network, right? And that gives him credibility, right? And I don't even remember who was that introduction, but the McAfee connection, I remember, right? And so he leveraged that, and it gave him a chance to, sit down and kind of tell his story. But it was still in a prove me or show me perspective. And that's when is Sai, no is the first step to yes. And they recognized that, hey, they were the smaller fish and they were going to make it easier. And so every time they just kept plodding on and made it easier. And they literally knocked down the walls, right? The barriers that were set with, I would say, strong focus, right? And then by having a good product, because he had a good idea, there was adoption. And once he got the adoption and people saw, wow, the customers adopted it. Sai was really good, again, making it easy. in my inbox the next day, here's a Winwire showcasing why we won, how we won together, right? And I'm able to show that with my Salesforce.
What is a Winwire? I don't even, that's a new word for me.
A Winwire is actually a great tool. A Winwire is literally a short email that you can use to kind of say, hey, we won this customer. Here's how much they spent. Here's why we won. Who we competed against, right? These are used, were used by AWS, and they used to always go all the way up to like Andy Jassy, who ran AWS as an example. I use those, and every time I would get them, I would send out to the entire Salesforce, because nothing proves that something works more than a success and a customer saying, hey, I was willing to pay money for this. So Sai was really good at saying, hey, we got a customer pay money, and it was friction. And in this case, they were able to pay less price and they closed quickly. All these key little value props that we care about. So the technology and the differentiation was interesting. And actually they do have a good use case, but the fact that someone said, I'm willing to buy this quickly, and it was easy to close the business, that's the low friction, that's gold. And that, especially when you're the smaller company, if you do those things well, you're going to get noticed, and then you can let your differentiation shine. And that's what they did really well. So that's the best advice: is your differentiation will come, but don't forget against the meat and potato stuff.
Yeah. And for startups, personally too, I'm a big believer in milestones, and the milestones keep changing. So initial milestone is show some value, show that you're easy to work with, then win a first customer, then win more customers, then show that you are helping them win, then talk about outcomes, then join marketing. And so, you can't stand still. So the process of building trust and relationships is that, you keep chasing milestones.
So it'll be great. Yeah, sorry. If you even bring up the next survey or the next quiz.
I was going to bring up that's exactly what I was just about to do.
Awesome.
So actually what I have right now is this slide. You've kind of been talking about that a little bit, but the 4 elements of the startup. Tell me if you'd like me to go to the quiz already, or the poll, and I'll do that.
This is actually, I think, very important, especially to share your perspective on this.
Yeah, there are many dimensions to a startup, but at a high level, if you want to distill it, there's your idea, your product. And so, in our case, it was about the human and being an advisor to the human. And so you don't start something unless you have a clear idea and you see that as filling, some white space in the market. Often, most startups, they go after a niche and then they grow, out of that niche. But the idea is critical. And along with the idea, hopefully, you have a team as well. Second part is proof points. A customer is a proof point, an investor is a proof point, a partner is a proof point, or even a customer meeting sometimes is a proof point. And so, there are different types of proof points, different assets, media coverage, references, people who believe in you, all of that, so you accumulate proof points. And once you have that, in most cases, you need funds. Somebody needs to back you. You can't build a good company without, unless people are willing to invest their time. But you do need to invest ahead to actually build, a cutting edge product or to build a company. The amount that you need to raise may vary depending on your idea, and you can bootstrap. But to do it in quick time, there's fundraising, and then that's one of the benefits of being here. There's an entire fundraising ecosystem, and so to do that,
can you remind everybody what bootstrapping is, if you don't mind?
Yeah, bootstrapping is where you build a company on your own, without a VC. So we tried it. The first year we raised very little funding, but we tried to build it. And you build the product, you find customers, and so you don't take outside funding. So that's bootstrapping. The trade-off there is that the benefit of bootstrapping is that you don't dilute. As founders, you're always conscious of how much of the company you own versus others. So the benefit of bootstrapping is that you don't dilute your equity. Your company is your own. But the trade-off is that your ability to hire and move fast is often limited. So
yes, because that's as you may or may not know, that's the when you get outside money, they take a percentage of your company. And often, and they provide value to that, but they also, especially early on, they take a large percentage of your company. And as someone who's bought a bunch of companies, very few bootstrap companies make it. It's very hard because you need to scale. And I'm often shocked how many, especially younger startups with younger entrepreneurs, they don't realize how much of their company they've given up or they have to give up to get started. And like their first round, they may give up 25 to 50% of their company for their first little round, and recognize that you may go through 5 rounds before you get public or have an exit. And so each time, that's what he means by dilution, is your ownership, your percent of ownership goes down. So, I've, definitely have seen that happen to a bunch of entrepreneurs where, especially Palo Alto Networks, where I did a bunch of acquisitions, we bought the company and the founders, their blood, sweat, and tears for the last 7-8 years, and they own less than 5% of the company.
Yep.
And so, although we might have paid $100 million, right? Not that $5 million is not a lot, but after taxes and for the 8 years of your life, it doesn't feel like a lot. So it's something you always want to be aware of as you fundraise. What percentage of your company you're giving up? But keep going. What's number 4?
And number 4 is where, once you, let's say, found investors, you've got some proof points. It's about making that's when you hit product market fit. That's the most often used. That's one of the most often used words here in Silicon Valley. So can you scale? Have you, for example, Netscope that Andy is now part of, they are at scale. We are not yet there. We're starting to scale. And so there's an evolution of companies where the last stage is actual scale. In cybersecurity, if you hit $1 million of revenue, you're not going to die. Somebody is going to pick you up. If you hit $10 million of revenue, you're in rarefied territory. If you hit $25 million, you're further into the rarefied territory. If you hit 100 million, you're nearing the IPO range. And so growing and hitting that hockey stick, and you do that through more customers, a large sales team, or channel partnerships, or OEMs. So there are a number of paths to that, but actual scale, where you have a large base of customers who use and buy your product.
So why don't you bring up as Sai's kind of gone through and illustrated, I think a good spot, bring up the quiz, in terms of, very curious to see the audience, what they think is most important.
Yeah, absolutely. As I'm doing that and sharing the screen here, I am curious to know where you are in the hockey stick right now, Sai. Where do you think you are?
We are in the scaling stage. We are in the scaling stage today.
Okay. Well, let me go ahead and bring up this poll. You had asked the question, where do you think most startups struggle? And I'll go ahead and launch. You talked about those 4 areas: the idea, the proof points, the fundraising, and the scaling. It'll be interesting to see where people think the struggle is. Oh, this is interesting. We have a 3-way tie almost. Sorry, I'm not sharing it yet.
No, well, I'm curious. So we're on the first question, Sai and I had a very different perspective. Here, we have a very similar perspective.
Yeah.
So I am going to just let it go for another 3 seconds. 3, 2, and 1. I'm going to end that poll, share those results. And proof points, fundraising, and scaling are all very, very close, with, interestingly enough, from students, the idea being low.
We kind of gave them a few clues, from the previous survey. But yeah, exactly. For us to proof points was the hardest. You think you're so cool, you got an idea, but then you go to a first set of fundraisers and you get beaten up. You go to customers and they tell you, come back to me in 6 months, come back to me in a year. Especially in cybersecurity, companies don't just, buy from a startup. There's compliance checks that you need to clear. There's security checks you need to clear. Buying cycles can often be long. And so that building the trust with the customer is really hard. So proof points, in terms of customers who actually buy your product. Hiring people, engineers to trust you and join your company. Media coverage, where people are covering you as a startup or others. Partners, getting people like Andy to bet on us. All of this is hard. And each of this takes time too. You have to wait, work on them, and patiently cultivate relationships. Nothing happens overnight. That was actually the hardest part.
Yeah, and I agree. And the company where I see companies struggle with really are those proof points, right? Because they think they have an idea, and getting between the proof point and really scaling to customers, it's all the different data points that tell you you're on the right track, and they tell you, the founder and the entrepreneur, but also potential investors, potential partners, because that's what we're looking for. We're looking for the evidence and those proof points, and be able to tell that story. They're, from my perspective, where startups really struggle the most. Once you get behind those, fundraising actually is not hard, especially right now. Obviously, different environments right now, fundraising is actually not that difficult. And then scaling, right? The good thing, especially cybersecurity, there's definitely people who want to try stuff, but once you get the proof points, it's easier to scale. But scaling would be number two of where companies struggle. And you see all the time, there's sometimes the people who are really good starters, right, with the idea and even the proof points, may not be the right people for scale. Right. And you see I'm not a startup guy, right? I can't do it. I'm probably not what Sai has done. I'm actually good at helping companies scale. That's where my skill set has really developed. And that's honestly where I'm more comfortable and generally more valued. So it's different parts of the journey, but you got to think about all four steps.
Yeah. And hungry startup guys hustle, founders always hustle, but that does not scale. As a founder, you can do $2 million of business, $3 million of business, but to scale, you need a repeatable process. You need to build a team, and you need to coach people so that, you can, it's not about individuals, it's about your company, and it's not enough if a few people know how to hustle. And that brings a new set of questions, do you truly want to scale your company and get it to IPO, or do you want to sell it to others who know how to scale the company? And so there are trade-offs. Do you raise more money? Do you bring in a new team? Do you bring in new leadership? And so you gotta always bring in new energy. Every couple of years, especially here, new energy is good. But how you do it, how you change your ownership, how you change your leadership, how you change your sales strategy, all of that, your company is a living being. You always need to keep changing it.
How do you do that? How do you start to go through these decisions with your leadership team? I mean, it's huge. Are you going to go IPO? Are you going to try to get acquired? I don't know to what extent you can talk about what you are doing right now, Sai.
Yeah, these are always, this is as much art as it's science. And so having a good set of advisors, who been there, done that. 90% of situations in life, they're not unique to you. And so having the right investors, even when you get investors, there are trade-offs. Do you get the people who give you the most valuation, or do you get people who can actually be strategic and add value to your company? You need to surround yourself with smart people who you can listen to, partners who can give you advice. Actually, Andy, we met like 3 months back, and we had an interesting discussion. And so personally, I think listening and surrounding yourself with people who can give you advice and direct you, listening to multiple opinions, and then using your own logic. That's the science part of it. Hey, this seems right for me, because each of us are different. Our risk appetite is different. Our situation in life is different. And having the trust within your founding team too, to have these honest discussions and say what you want. It's always important at some point to say, hey, this is the outcome I want. And that honesty is important, but surrounding yourself with people and getting guidance is quite useful too, because chances are, somebody's been through it before.
And for a lot of entrepreneurs, there's always the dream of the IPO, right? And that's where VCs actually can be super helpful. Is you think about most VCs, if you get 1 out of 20 investments to go public, you're a superstar, you're a rock star. But that means 19 didn't go public. And either that means they fizzled out and died, which is really unsuccessful, or they luckily got acquired. And that's where I would definitely advise some small companies. And it's important is being acquired is a successful outcome, because it especially puts money in your pocket. You can go do it again, take all the learnings that you've had and go and do something bigger and greater. And that's why you see these serial entrepreneurs, and having an exit actually will make it easier to get the proof points, easier to get the fundraising in the future, because now you're at least shown your investors, right, and potentially partners, you have an idea what you're doing, right? And there's a path there. But for any entrepreneur to understand, as you have those discussions, and I have this with a lot of different companies, it's more likely you're going to get acquired. And so always be thinking about who would likely acquire you, right? And you don't want to, because you got to think about building up a team and your employees, but you have to find that right balance, and it's hard. Because the other thing I see companies make a mistake is once they finish have an offer in front of them, or once they think about being acquired, their mind goes there. It's like when you get a new job, or it's being a second semester senior. Once your mind is there and you've moved on to grad school or college, or graduation, or your next job, it's very hard to kind of put 100% into what you're doing. You've mentally moved on, and that's where I see companies struggle. But to always know that that's likely a good path, and it's not a bad thing. And companies sometimes struggle with how to find the right balance.
Yeah, there's the often cited statistic: 90% or 95% of startups fail. Failure is when your company dies. It's easy to define. But the remaining 5% of startups succeed. Success has many flavors. Success can be, a thriving business that generates cash flow every month for you. Success can be an acquisition where you get a one-time payout and continuing payout in the form of equity in acquiring entity, and so on. And then there's IPO, where you build your company. But sometimes, even if it's an IPO, maybe you're the founder, you want to step aside and let a professional team do it. So success has many flavors, and there's no one size fits all. So you got to figure out what's right for your company, and what's right for your team. But there are multiple levels.
We'll switch over to student questions in a minute, but since you brought it up, I am curious to know, as we finish this kind of segment, what is success for you and what you're doing right now, Sai, and what is it for you and what you're doing, Andy, since you've also just started at a new company?
Yeah, success for me is, somebody, we actually went through an exercise 6 months back. We defined it as 1 million users on our platform, securing millions of users from falling victim. If we actually do that, financially, we're going to be fine. Outcome-wise, as founders, we are going to be fine. Mission in life, we're going to be fine, and company is going to do well. We are going to do well. So the underlying outcome for us is we want at least 1 million users on our platform using us and being secure. That's, if we do that, we know we've succeeded. That's how I see it. It enables good things. Maybe we get acquired, maybe we, it becomes bigger, or maybe it's somewhere in between. But still, if we actually do a job, if the product does its job, if our team does the job, and we are securing users, success will follow.
And I'm a metric-oriented individual. And so I think I've joined Netscope, and really my goal is really to add value to the company. And I think about how I measure that, right? And as a BD guy, business development guy, it's got to be through these partnerships. And it's about accelerating revenue growth. Can I help my company grow faster? Can I get what's called net retention? So all these technology integrations where we work together with other companies, the customers who use those, they spend more money with Netscope. And then do they have lower churn? And churn means that you stop using the product. So that all the customers that I work with that use the things that my team interacts with, that they spend more with Netscope and they stay a customer in Netscope for a longer period of time. And those are the measurable metrics. And I do all those things, and my team does all those things. Netscope will hopefully be successful, and I think we're on a path to be a public company, which is really exciting. And I got to do that with Barracuda. I went through that IPO process, and it's super exciting. It's a lot of fun, and that both on a personal and professional perspective is really kind of what I hope for. So that's kind of where the journey is, at least for me on a personal level.
That's kind of nice, and it kind of rounds us out. And I can't wait to hear from some students. Ronan, Roman, it would be nice if I could read. I apologize. Please ask your question, and we'll just so you, Sai and Andy, we'll just slowly bring students in, and they have some questions.
Right. Thank you so much, Sai and Andy, for just coming today and telling us about this. It's super fascinating, exciting. To get straight to the point, you talked a little bit about the fragmented market of the industry that you're in, the cybersecurity, and you talked a little bit about the why. So I'll focus more on, what would you imagine as a market solution to solve this? Is the market does the cybersecurity field just too diverse to have, one centralized platform, or what would you imagine would, solve this problem?
Yeah, the realist in me says that there's no answer, there's no solution. when you think about the adversary in cybersecurity, there are all kinds of adversaries. The most formidable adversary is the nation state. So you have, entire nations, some of the most powerful nations on earth who want to take you down. How do you defend against that as a company? You probably cannot. Then there are organized gangs. Then there are hobbyist hackers. And then there is the innocent, but accidental hacker. So there are different types of hackers. And, in cybersecurity, you can always get the platform approach by Microsoft and forget everyone else, but they're not the best of breed. And then there's a best of breed solution because the problems are so diverse. The attack surface, things that a hacker can attack. They can go after your device. They can go after your human. They can go after your network. They can go after your website. They can go after your email server. So diverse. And each of these are different technologies. The skills needed to build these are different. And so, one of the reasons why you have so many startups in cybersecurity is that there are so many different angles and the hacker needs to focus on one and get inside. So realistically, we are going to progress, but there's no, the fragmentation is going to remain. But what you're going to see improve is interoperability. These security solutions start to work better together. And, and there's also a massive talent shortage. The single largest area in tech with a talent shortage is cybersecurity. There are like 3 million vacancies. And so there's a massive human problem as well. So realistically, we're not going to solve the problem. It's going to remain an acute problem for some time to come, but you're going to see solutions work better and reduce the need for so much human intervention.
Yeah, and so I agree with what Sai said, Roman. I think as you think about cybersecurity, and I said this to Rishi earlier, we were talking, what is very unique, and honestly, one of the things that makes it dynamic and interesting is you compete against other companies that do what you do, right? Security Advisor has competitors, right? Some of those have even been acquired, right? And they have to find their solution needs better, but we compete against the bad guys, the adversaries, as Sai talked about, and they don't stop. And they bring the newest tools, the newest weapons, right? The power of cloud, the different AI. So it is so dynamic that it's really hard for one company to stay on top, because when you get bigger, then you have to maintain that product. So the bigger scale you are, you have to spend so much on the maintenance just to make sure bugs and security patches stay, that investing in new areas that may develop becomes difficult. It's why companies like Microsoft and Palo Alto Networks and Cisco, they make so many acquisitions because they've got to focus on their core. They can't let that lapse, that it's easier for them to companies on the side that have been investing in new stuff and bring them in. And even as they bring them in, and look, Cisco's done a great job of buying companies. Palo Alto Networks done a great job. Microsoft, right? It still doesn't give you full coverage. And there's always new threats in cybersecurity. And that is what's really unique. And there's different areas. And, if you think about the world, and I'm biased, I deal a lot with public cloud, AWS, Microsoft, Google, think how big they are. Right, the fastest, most growing business in the world, right? In terms of the cloud side of their business, billions of dollars at scale, 80, 100% growth, which has been truly remarkable. They have done some security, but not a ton, because they know it's so dynamic that it's actually better to actually let the experts deal with it. So that's why I don't think there will be a true one, cybersecurity company, and there's just things that change all the time. One thing that's interesting for me, and he worked for an Israeli startup company. Pre-pandemic, I would go to Israel every year because Israel alone, which is a country smaller than the state of New Jersey, they have 500 cybersecurity startups, and their military, because they're under such constant attack. If you're in this Israeli army dealing with cybersecurity and you spend 5 to 10 years there, that's like going to Berkeley, Harvard, and MIT. Right, and getting your education in cybersecurity, and they still haven't figured it out, right? And so that's why I don't think there will be a full one platform company.
Right. Thank you so much for your answer.
Thanks, Roman. I think Rishi was going to go next, then Tahir, and then hopefully Catherine will come in and ask her question. Go ahead, Rishi.
Yeah, thank you both of you so much for your time. I mean, I love how you kind of mentioned sort of security consolidation, especially with Palo Alto Networks and some of these larger vendors, like taking up some of these really high growth, highly innovative startups. And kind of my question was that, I mean, since COVID-19, we've seen a huge push in terms of digital transformation, so many trends. So what's happening in security? I would love to hear both of your thoughts on kind of trends for this year, beyond, what's kind of washing the wind with like venture investing, and what's really meant to be here to stay.
Sure. I want to go first, or you want to go first?
Go ahead.
So there's always buzzwords, right? And there's marketing, right? And so I would say the key buzzwords right now are zero trust, XDR, and I would say, my company's a big one. What?
Your SASE.
So, yeah, SASE and SASE, Secure Access Service Edge, right? And so those are trends, but ultimately, what problems are we trying to solve, right? And ultimately, it's usually it's new attack vectors that come up, right? And so, you guys are all relatively young, right? I remember a time where there were no cell phones, right? I didn't have a cell phone in college. I remember when I got my first email account in college, right? Those are two of the biggest attack vectors, right? Of just where the bad guys, right? I'm sure you get those fake phone calls or texts, right? And you've definitely gotten, what's called phishing emails. Those don't stop, and they get more and more sophisticated. And then public cloud, just all the things that you can do again with Google and Amazon, it's mind blowing, right? And then you think about IoT didn't exist, right? So it just, those are new ways for the bad guys to, get in and take advantage of things. And so that's where I think cybersecurity in terms of growth and new areas is going to continue. It's just really, it's the new ways that say a bad guy can get into a system, because ultimately the hackers, they're after money. Right? Ultimately, there's anything, but ultimately they're either after information or they're after money. And so if you look at, in the news today, you see lots of ransomware, right, is the big concern right now, which if you don't know is when someone literally gets in, they take, they pretty much lock in a phone or a PC and say, you got to pay me to unlock this device or unlock your network. And until you pay me, you're stuck. And a lot of companies pay, right? And because they don't have a choice. So that's what I see.
With the pandemic, a word I keep hearing is the new normal. The world has changed a bit. Some things remain the same, but a large proportion of workers are now remote workers. There's a mixing of personal and professional work. You're at home, you're mixing professional things, personal work. And so there's no perimeter. Historically, there was a perimeter for your people, for your data. It's all gone. People are everywhere. Your data is everywhere. And so you have to work in this new world where everything is everywhere. And security teams historically are the bad guys. They always say, hey, no, you cannot do that. They say no. And there's this traditional argument about security versus productivity. Your employees, they want to embrace new things. They want to be innovative. The security guys, they want to secure the company. And they are the guys who say, no, sorry, you cannot do that. And so with the new world, with remote work, with everything everywhere, the security guys can no longer be those bad guys, And so the security teams are being forced to being more nimble, embrace change, and say yes instead of no. And so, that's an interesting new dynamic. The pandemic is a horrible thing for the world, but for cybersecurity, we are beneficiaries. So.
Yeah. And that's always a balance, productivity and security. And you find, because the security guys, they say no because they want to protect the company. And there's just so much new technology, just different applications. Think of many apps you guys have probably tried on your phone or, on the web, right? And again, every time you do that, it's a new potential threat vector that someone's got to make sure the bad guys don't come in. So that's kind of the trend piece. Rishi, did that answer your question?
Yeah. No, thank you so much. It definitely seems like there's kind of a sort of balance between developers, DevOps, and then security teams kind of fighting, clashing with one another. So see if there's any opportunity for collaboration between them. It's really exciting where things are going. And I guess Tahir, if you want to go next.
Yes. Hi. Hi, Sai. Hi, Andy. Thank you guys for sharing all this valuable pieces of wisdom, especially it was especially valuable for me because I'm not very entrepreneurial and I don't know much about the world, but about entrepreneurship, but I'm learning. And I was wondering, my question was kind of about the expertise in computer security. I was wondering if you could talk about the usefulness of competitions such as Capture the Flag, ACM ICPC, or various other programming contests in becoming a proficient computer security expert. And in turn, how relevant is being a good computer security expert is from an entrepreneurial standpoint?
I can take a first cut at it. I'm sure, it's very useful. It's getting you more interested into the space. And, but cybersecurity is so vast, even within engineering, the previous person, Rishi, he talked about DevOps, there's DevSecOps, there's, different type full stack engineers, they're the people who, work on our cloud and SLAs and support and sales engineers. And so, there are different tech capabilities. Similarly, the product managers, and then the selling, sales managers. So, to answer your question, absolutely, it's getting you more interested, it's getting you the building blocks, and then there's no better way than getting your hands dirty. So maybe doing an internship for someone in your stage in a company, 1 month in, let's say, engineering, 1 month in, let's say, product management, or even business development. And so there are so many different skill sets, and even within tech, there's UX. In fact, I would argue that the most important part of cybersecurity is actually the user experience, where the user is, let's say, an administrator. And so how your product works, the set of steps that someone takes, the visuals behind your product. And so there are multiple skill sets. By engaging in all these different competitions, you are building up. And so you're building the muscles needed. And so they definitely help, but I suspect that internships or even a starter job, and there are many of those, you can be a researcher, you can be a SOC analyst, you can be a programmer, you can be a UX person, you can be a product manager. There's just so many different jobs, you see what's right for you and pick one of those.
So here would be my perspective. So those competitions will be incredible at getting you, I would say, a job within the cybersecurity field, either for a vendor or in an internal, security, practice at a company like a Nike or Bank of America. Will it give you great entrepreneurial perspective? Limited, but what it will give you is actually, again, you're on a journey, right? So it's going to get you maybe that first job where you'll learn a bunch, right? And because you'll know deep about cybersecurity, you'll have ideas, you can go become a practitioner, you can then validate some of the things you've had, kind of similar to the way Sai did, right? He had a theory, he validated it, right? Security advisor probably was in his head during when you were at McAfee, right? And then you went to Fort Scale. It's still there, but you're there to be a successful entrepreneur, you need to think about a whole company, right? It's not just being a cyber, the idea part, it may help you with, but the proof points, the scale, right? Thinking about positioning, product management, marketing, sales, that from when you're an entrepreneur, you got to think about all the different aspects. Those kind of, I would say, that experience, those contexts, they will just give you depth in cybersecurity, which I think will hire you in a second for a specific job, but it doesn't make you jump out as an entrepreneurial. It's one arrow in your quiver. That's how I would.
I was thinking about it just now. Some of the best entrepreneurs I know are people who actually won a lot of competitions in college. I think there is some correlation between people who win these competitions in college and who become entrepreneurial eventually, but it's not scientific.
But because that, I think that skill set of being a winner, right? Of focus on getting deep in something, right?
Yeah.
And that's where you can go and test some of your ideas, which is great. But again, to be an entrepreneur, then you got to think about the other parts of the equation.
Yep.
So I'll just add something. When you're doing those games, make sure you meet those people around you.
Yes.
That's a great way to meet people, I think.
And you definitely get noticed. I mean, there's a reason, especially Capture the Flag, both at CrowdStrike and Palo Alto Networks, we paid attention, right? But more from a recruiting perspective, right? So winning those contests, and especially if they're sponsored by a company, using, showing yourself and then networking, it's a great way to kind of start your journey.
Thank you very much, guys. Appreciate it.
Sure.
I think Catherine has a question. Catherine, are you going to come on?
Yes, I'm just kind of outside right now, and my internet isn't so great, so I can't have my camera on. But first off, thank you both for being here and speaking today. It's been super interesting to hear about. So I was just wondering, how far does that kind of real-time advice aspect go that you guys talked about earlier? Is it purely integration with different cybersecurity products, protecting against that kind of misconfiguration and providing hardening suggestions? or are there use cases for privacy conscious individuals such as journalists and academics?
Yeah, there are lots of privacy use cases. For example, we can say, hey, Kathy, you just shared this on Slack. Everybody can see this. This looks like sensitive data. Are you sure? Can be, there's a trade-off, the advice itself can be invasive, or you can say, hey, Kathy, you're in the top quartile of risky users in our company, and here's some advice for you. Or, hey, Kathy, don't worry about it, but in our organization, we are seeing suspicious emails with these subject lines. So we can provide different types of advice that is tailored to you, your persona, and based on your organizational policies. It can use personal data, or it can also be based on company data.
Yeah, and just because Plug and Play, like his company is Security Advisor, right? Plug and Play is the incubator. But he definitely did a good job. Because obviously, Security Advisor is his company. But what is really unique is it does use different data sources, different events to provide that real-time advice. So it really is focused on the human and important. His company makes it for everyone who's not cybersecurity literate, right? So because that's where most of the things that happen, it's because someone within an organization did something by mistake. They clicked on the bad link. They responded to a phishing attack, and they sent money out. It's then seeing that behavior, and security advisor can say, hey, are you sure you should be clicking on the URL? Let me tell you how to look at the email header to make sure it's a real address. Those are the type of things and what are really unique and catching you in the moment. It's actually even a tool kind of use when you kind of, one day you'll have kids where you want to, show your kids of not making the same mistake. It's catching in the moment, telling them about the mistake they did a week ago doesn't necessarily resonate. So that's why I love their product, because it catches you in the moment, and therefore we can make it resonate and hopefully change behavior.
So in this moment, I just want you all to know I'm sharing our code, the CyberVC ! So we'll take 2 more questions as I have that code posted. And I feel like I might have interrupted you, Andy.
No, I'm good.
Tyler, would you like to go ahead and ask your question?
Sure, thanks. Just thanks for all you've done so far, Sai, and it's been really interesting. So I'm a junior transfer into the ECS program here at Berkeley, and what I wanted to know was mainly addressed at Sai, I guess. What company that you worked at gave you the most cybersecurity experience? Or
for me, it was McAfee. In cybersecurity, there's a term, the McAfee Mafia. A lot of startups came out of McAfee. It used to be a great company, not so great anymore. But for me, it was definitely McAfee managing data security products, interfacing with a large set of product leaders. So that's a straight, easy answer for me.
And I'm going to answer for you, Tyler, 2 things. So to hear's question, I think that point is really important. So there's lots of people who worked at McAfee who then went on to found their own companies or become a CEO of companies. If you look around the industry, right, that's very true, right? Titanium, at CrowdStrike, at Forescout, all like former McAfee people and all over, right? So I think that perspective of getting places, for me, I'm going to tell you, Barracuda Networks is like where I learned the most, because I had someone, the chief product officer, named Steve Powell, who was willing to educate me, right? Whether it was because I didn't know anything, I knew very little about cybersecurity. So a lot to me, it's finding that mentor. And then again, that's just general good advice. I've been super lucky that I've had great mentors throughout my life at companies I've worked with. And then there's still mentors later on. I want to be a mentor to Sai, right? And I want to pay that back. But whatever role you take at university, whether it's a professor or if you have an internship, finding those people who are willing to give you that, I would say, real world education is where you can actually get really deep and understand how things work and actually be able to have that one-on-one dialogue that develop friendships, mentorships, and really help your career.
Yeah. In undergrad college, especially, it can be competitive, but over life, it's about relationships. 1 + 1 is more than 2. And, the relationships are what get you your next job, your funding, and it carries across multiple different jobs. So, to Andy's point, investing in relationships and giving as much as taking is actually critical.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Tyler. We're going to finish up with Aditya's question, who's not here at the moment, but I think it kind of is an interesting way to think. She asks, or he asks, I apologize. They ask, you both had relatively traditional starts to your careers, Bain, Morgan Stanley. How did you frame the decision to leave those low risk, medium reward, I love these words, careers, and jump to something with high risk, potentially high reward careers? Like, what was it what was the thought process you went through as you made those decisions, if you can think back to that?
So I'll go first because yours is much more exciting from that perspective. For me, and it goes back to a little bit of the culture, Morgan Stanley, safe, but it was very clear it's not what I wanted to do, right? And so going to a hedge fund actually in itself was very risky, right? And I would say, I would say actually very high reward working at hedge fund, but I would say emotionally highly painful. I think that's a difference between your culture. New York, you get yellers in New York. There's not a lot of yellers in California. There's just a different way of management style. So it was really, for me, the pain in what I wanted to become even as an individual. And for me, it was actually, I was out in California a bunch, and I love California. I still love California. My wife makes the joke, the only way I'm going back to the East Coast is in a box. And I love it out here. You know, hopefully whether you stay or not, you've had a chance to live out here and have a very unique experience. And, you know, I love being close to the wine country, to the beach, to all the intellectual stimulation. And, you know, plus it's just a beautiful place to live. So really it was about what I wanted for my life. And, you know, as in being, you know, where you sit when you're 20 versus 30 versus, you know, I'll be 47 next week. You just have a different perspective on life, and you know, being willing to go on the journey and recognize that life will change and you're not gonna be able to predict everything, but having a plan is not a bad thing. Sai?
Yeah, you know, it's a very personal decision. You know, I actually enjoyed my time at Bain, and you know, the categorization of low risk, medium reward is probably right though. Very low risk job, you're happy, very safe environment. In terms of rewards, in the relative scheme of things, probably medium to high medium. You know, I was really, and you know, I'd moved to California, but I don't have roots in California. You know, I'm still not wedded to California. For me, you know, the reason to stay in California was to start up. You know, there's a unique ecosystem, and so there's this unique opportunity, and so, you know, financially, emotionally, I was ready. You know, it's the psychology of starting up is, you know, you need to be ready to take that plunge. There's maybe a year where you don't get a salary. And so I felt like, you know, I had saved up enough, ready to take the risk. And you know, it's not like, so if the risk is if you are in a low paying job in a high cost economy like the Bay Area for a long time, but I was not wedded to California. So I was ready to take the risk. And that's when we started Security Advisor. So, but it's a personal choice, you know, it depends on what you want.
It is coming to the bottom of 6:30, bottom of the hour, I guess. And it has been so enlightening and in a wonderful way, so different than I thought what possibly our conversation would be. So I thank you all both for that. I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, since you mentioned internships, if somebody is interested in internship opportunity with either one of your companies, what should they do?
So, yeah, we can share our contact information and, you know, just write to us or ping us on LinkedIn.
Yeah, and we actually have a formal, we're a little bigger. We actually have a formal intern. Actually, I just 2 interns just started on my team. We've got actually ones that come in through actually our cybersecurity, like our actually security operations, our CISO office. But definitely, hey, I love giving back. So I've always had interns as part of my team, because I think it's actually a great a chance to give someone an opportunity and hopefully give them to learn, and they, you know, usually end up adding a lot of value. So yeah, definitely reach out, you know, LinkedIn or, you know, email perspective. And you know, there's the formal part, but you know, again, network. I'm part of your network. It's something to leverage. You never know when it may come in handy.
Absolutely, same here.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much. Can't wait to see what's next on the horizon for Security Advisor, and always wonderful. I'm waiting for the IPO for Netscope. So there you go. Thank you. Have a very, very good night. Thank you to all the students as well. And I'll stay on just a little while in case there are any questions. Take care, Sai and Andy.
Thank you.
Bye.